My name is Nikki Caboose. I'm the CEO of South Florida Tech Hub. We are a technology nonprofit that supports South Florida from Miami-Dade all the way up through Indian River. If anybody doesn't know Indian River, that's in the Treasure Coast. So it's basically the 3 counties all the way up the southeast side of the state. We actually just did our first couple of events in Southwest Florida as well this year. So really just trying to bring together the entire South Florida community. We have everything throughout the year from different peer groups and different events, conferences, even fun stuff like golf and just happy hours and ways for the community to connect. But we have 4 main core pillars that we kind of focus all of our energy underneath, which is talent, brand, community, and entrepreneurship. So talent meaning our tech talent and workforce pipeline. Branding is how are we branding South Florida as a tech hub? We're more than obviously Disney World and the palm trees and beaches. Those are wonderful things, but we want to make sure that people understand we have a really great business economy here, a lot of innovation, really cool companies, and this is a place to not only come visit as a tourist, but to come here and live, work, and play as well. Our third pillar of community is really everything that we're doing out in the community and connecting the community, making sure people know who's who, where to find resources, where to go, what's going on, different events coming up, and just making sure we can kind of stay centered in everything that's going on and educate our community so that they can get involved. And our fourth final pillar is entrepreneurship. We do a lot in the entrepreneurship space, supporting startups, businesses as they grow, everything from writing articles to hosting investor connection nights to doing, like I was saying, different networking events, but really trying to support the businesses as they grow. Our members could be an early stage startup all the way to a much larger enterprise. We have companies like the City Furnitures and Office Depots, Florida Crystals, all that is involved as well. So the size ranges pretty drastically, but we are also industry sector agnostic. So anything in tech, it could be fintech, health tech, it could be aerospace, it doesn't matter to us. As long as it's tech and innovation, we welcome anybody in the community that has an interest in technology. So I am going to hand it over to Brian. Brian, as you're talking, I'm going to make sure to drop for anybody that's in here links to all of our speakers today so that you can connect with them on LinkedIn, and anything that the speakers do mention, I'm going to do my best to Google and find those links if there's any resources that they mention. So just make sure that you guys are also kind of watching the chat for any informational post that I drop in there. If everybody that's in with us today, if you would like to tell us where you are, like where you're based, drop your LinkedIn URL just so you guys can connect. And then if you have feedback, questions, we'll make sure to save those. So once the panel is done, we'll make sure to get your questions to the speakers as well. So I'm going to pass it off to you, Brian.
Awesome. Great intro. Thank you, Nikki. Hello, everybody. Only took us 3 months and 2 hurricanes to get this going, but very excited to finally have some clear weather today. So welcome, everybody. This is very exciting. Obviously, artificial intelligence is, all the rave and all the talk. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation here. I'm an entrepreneur by background, and we all say that very loosely, but I've worked with a lot of healthcare companies, from startups to big companies like Columbia University Medical Center and Cleveland Clinic, and have seen the ways that AI is influencing the whole healthcare community, whether it's on the diagnostic side, enabling better treatments, quicker treatments, faster treatments, or at least faster diagnoses. On the research side, which we're going to talk about a lot today. And then, of course, what AI is doing for clinician burnout and how it's automating a lot of those admin processes that we've seen have, really kind of turned off so many to the healthcare profession. I'm a big believer in it's through collaboration that we can drive innovation, and it's only through innovation that we can really improve the patient experience. And I'd like to believe that that's why most of us are here. It's really to improve the patient experience and expand access to healthcare to everybody all across the spectrum. And so obviously today talking about AI and medical research, and we have 3 great panelists who I'd like everybody to just briefly introduce yourself and what you're doing in healthcare. Just a 2-minute intro, and then we'll dive in. So Dr. Tian, if you'd like to go first and introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Tian. I'm a scientific director at the Max Planck Florida Institute for Neuroscience. I'm actually relatively new. I just moved from California early this year in January. I was a professor and vice chair in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Medicine at the University of California, Davis for 12 years before I moved my whole family across the country to, beautiful Florida. So just a little bit intro about my lab. So basically my research is technology development. Basically we invent the novel optical and molecular tools to be able to understanding the brain function, especially neurotransmitter signaling that's actually related to neuropsychiatric and neurological disorders. And just to put it a simple way that the brain has a lot of chemistry, a lot of chemicals released in time and space. They form a very specific pattern of traffic that's actually determine how we think and how we learn, how we react. But without understanding this pattern and how they goes wrong at the disease state, it's really hard for us to develop a novel therapy. So in the past, we have been using artificial intelligence, actually in a simple way in our field called protein design, computational-based protein design, and also machine learning, algorithm to be able to design, drugs such as psychedelic, but without the side effect, which is hallucination. So we can actually develop those new drugs without hallucination. And then we can see that they are fast acting and can actually rescue the depressive behavior, at least in animal models. So we're really excited about this AI, where it goes. We think they can be really utilized for drug development, especially drug discovery development, and also develop the personalized medicine, like personalized treatment for the future. So in my lab, we develop those, molecular technology, but we also, disseminate this technology broadly to, the whole scientific community to bring everyone together for, to do the discovery. So it's really nice, the introduction, Nikki, you gave. I just want to say I completely agree that, Florida is not just a place to visit, to live for, a portion time this year. It's a time, when you develop our talent pools, when you really need to build the ecosystem to have, to think about the next generation. So we can create this ecosystem for talent to stay and to live, to work, and to build a community together. And we're also, gonna launch some innovation academy, really leverage the talent here. Maybe we can discuss this later. We can think about the ways to, foster an environment of innovation and help the, student like undergrad or graduate student to become entrepreneur and to start their own startups in the future. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Sounds like you're doing some really incredible stuff. And right off the bat, you mentioned fostering an environment of innovation, and that's what the South Florida peer groups are all about. And this group, the health tech peer group, we're really trying to build it up to be a community where we can knock around ideas together, help each other, support each other, and of course, collaborate. Like I said, collaboration drives innovation. And so, we're really trying to relaunch the health tech peer group and build it up tremendously to the point where we can have a lot more in-person events and get together and really just help each other and kick our ideas around and grow our network. So thank you for that. Great intro. Dr. Sanvi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Herschel Sangvi. I am a faculty at College of Business at Florida Atlantic University, and I also represent Center for Smart Health. So before 2 years, we launched this center, which is collaboration between engineering medicine and a few other use cases in College of Business. So the main aim and the goal of this center is to bring, synergy together. So, we have a lot of potentials in the engineering school with the bioengineering program we have. We have potential with the medicine school because we have attending physicians coming on a regular basis. So what we are trying to do is trying to bring everyone under the same roof, which is called Center for Smart Health. one of the reasons why this initiative is really useful is I'm a faculty at Broward Health, which is a state hospital at Deerfield Beach, and specifically in the Department of Ophthalmology. So if you see ophthalmology on a large scale, it's 70% technology. At the end of the day, everything goes on imaging. That's how it starts. And then if you also see a surgery use case, there are a lot of applications where bioengineering becomes really important. So one of the things, Dr. Tang, you mentioned is how we can help undergraduate and graduate students go through this process and be entrepreneurs. That is also one of the initiatives I and Nikki were working on with College of Business, with Adams Center for Entrepreneurship. So we create this lot of events within the campus, outside the campus, so we can bring a lot of people like Brian. Then we have a speaker from Modern Trials. So how we can synergize, we already have the knowledge base. We already have resources within a university framework. And from a hospital standpoint, we have the database. So now the only thing remains is connection. So that's what I think South Florida Tech Hub has been doing so far. I'm really happy. I'm also the vice chair of Health Tech Peer Group. So we are a community where what I try to do is I try to bring a bioengineer, a physicist, attending physician, and a faculty member all together to solve a problem. So if we have any operational issues in the hospital, if we speak about any sort of deploying issues in terms of deep learning models, or maybe if we see any opportunities where we can extend this not from diagnostic but also to the therapeutic approach, that really helps patient at the end of the day. So how can we reduce time of their visit to the hospital? How can we use deep learning model to help logistics team? How can we integrate machine learning into a framework where attendings can save time each patient, so they can see more patients throughout the day? So there are a lot of operational issues I've been working on how to implement this sort of technologies and put it into a real practice. So far, the ratio what I've seen is there are a lot of physicians who are willing to do this, but at the end of the day, you need a whole team to guide that physician how to implement in the whole setup. It's not just deploying a software. It's more like training their staff, training front-end desk, training the physician on how to use that model, how to do imaging portions. And at the end of the day, how can the cost be reduced from a patient-centric perspective? Because, nowadays, insurance is having a whole different set of framework. You all are connected to healthcare. So how can we have a cost reduction in terms of having technology do some of the therapeutics, so that can substitute some of the cost from the procedures they do on a typical basis? So that's where I'm lined up into healthcare operations from a day-to-day standpoint. But at the end of the day, I also like doing research. I really adore what Max Planck Institute is doing. I had a chance to work in neurosurgery with Baptist Health for a couple of months as I was doing my postdoc before. But right now, what I'm trying to do is expand, machine learning applications in the field of ophthalmology and orthopedics. Those are the two base regions I work on a daily basis. But in general, I also see applications of how we can synergize the whole bioengineering space into the operations of healthcare. So that is where,
and I think we'll get into that. I think we'll dive into that. You're jumping. That's fantastic. That's great introduction, and thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and some of the things you mentioned too is one of the other visions that I have for healthcare is that our healthcare system can be moved towards a more of a proactive and less of a reactive healthcare system. And artificial intelligence has a lot of potential to be able to do that, right? Something that you're kind of alluding to there. How can we utilize technology to keep people healthy instead of having to treat them once they're ill? And a lot of that has to do with the clinical trials, and that leads me to you, Chris. Introduce yourself and Modern Trials.
Everybody else gets doctor. I get Chris. It's all good.
Sorry, brother.
I am CEO of Modern Trials, and I'll talk a little bit about it. But at the bottom line, we provide solutions for clinical trial recruitments. So finding enough and representative patients to fill clinical trials. I am a recovering academic, so I was faculty at Columbia University for a number of years. I'm a real fake doctor, so my doctorate's in clinical psychology. Did that, slowly moved my way into research administration, i.e. clinical trials. Did that for the better part of a decade and a half. And then started this little gem that we'll talk about, and one of our primary service offerings to be released in Q1 2025, and we are eyeball deep in AI implementation. So I'll be able to tell you about some of the joys and tribulations. It's sort of like having a really smart child that doesn't always behave.
And
Thank you for that, Dr. Ochner. So first question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask this all three of you because they're very different perspectives and very different areas that you're working on. What are some of the most significant advancements in AI that have impacted medical research in recent years? So again, what are some of the most significant advancements in artificial intelligence that have impacted medical research in recent years? Dr. Tian, would you like to jump in first?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question because, as you all know, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2024 goes to, computational modeling, right? So basically, it's it's computation model, like all those AI-based research, and goes to David Baker, who is a world kind of famous, renowned scientist in computational design, the pioneers in computational design, and also the other two scientists, one's from Google, because of AlphaFold, right? So if you ask me the impact, I can give you a very simple answer. It take us, for example, 3 years to solve a structure of the protein, to a couple hours, we can get a simulated structure.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's this, it's really accelerated, the research. But to be honest, the similar structure is accurate enough, right? Because all those years of those development, the hard work from scientists deposit those protein structures in the data bank, right? We call it PDB. So they can have all this training data, right? So that's for AI, the most important thing is prediction. But how do you determine the accuracy of the prediction is from the data set? And because it's a contribution, right? Because all this contribution from all the scientists, they could have leveraged this data set to predict, any of the protein structures in a few hours instead of years. So that's basically tells you, why the Nobel Prize in 2024 chemistry goes to AlphaFold and Rosetta Fold. This is the computational design of the protein and molecules, because this actually really serves the basis for in silicon design of drugs, right? So we know most of the drug target the receptors, especially for, actually, if you think about it, 1/3 of FDA-approved drugs target to the receptors. Those membrane-bound protein, they're really hard to solve. They're really hard to solve their crystal structure or cryo-EM structure. With the stimulation, in couple hours, you can actually docking so many different drugs. You probably can actually design tons of, like thousands of drugs in silico, and then move on to the test to the next stage. So that's the impact we're talking about AI in basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen some geneticists doing fabulous stuff that just exactly what you were saying, things that used to take 6 to 9 months to be able to figure out, and now they can figure out in a couple of hours, and just the implications across healthcare, just focus on that, are tremendous in and of itself.
Exactly.
Dr. Sangvi, what about you? What do you see as some of the most significant advancements in AI that have impacted medical research recently?
so just adding to what Dr. Tyne said, there are a lot of advancements where if you just talk about patients having Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, there are a lot of deep learning models which also, assist physicians to look at the electrical signals on whether they're looking at the pain versus no pain images on the screen, or how they are responding to certain kinds of behavior. So there is a whole combination of how patients are reacting to certain kinds of disease progression, or how patients are responding to certain kind of interventions they have. So if if the whole AI sector has been talking about deep models and implementing deep models for detection and diagnosis, there is also research going on where you can also use deep learning models for therapeutics. At the end of the day, what research has been really popular in the field I'm working right now is how we can make compact solutions on using handheld fundus and OCT cameras, click images of the eye. So for example, if I take image of the eye, Brian, right now, and if I say that, hey, Brian, you're eating a lot of sugar, let's say if you don't cut down the sugar at the age of, let's say 55 or 60, you may get diabetes, right? So I can only say that when I click the OCT images of your eye, right? So the backend images of your eye. For that, you need to be in person. But again, if I say that, Brian, you don't worry about it, just see there is a bar in front of you, just see on that bar, we can click few images after your consent, and those images can be seen by a physician. It's a telehealth module at the end of the day, right? But it clicks the fundus images, it clicks the OCT images. Basically, it's an iPhone, right? iPhone clicks images of your eye, and then I can interpret that what sort of disease progression you might have, or if you don't change your eating habits, you may have in the future. So those kind of therapeutic models are also being utilized at certain medical centers, at certain hospitals right now. Second area where AI research is very popular is how robotics could be implemented doing surgery on a very, very accurate basis. So there are a lot of surgical guides which have been developed using artificial intelligence and augmented reality altogether framework. So a trained physician doing a surgery, if you can mimic that surgery, and if you can also create a surgical guide perspective, then a new resident walks into a room, has that goggles on their head with an augmented reality vision, does the surgery. And if the surgery is not in a proper shape, the surgical guides help them out navigating on how a physician was doing it. So it's not just about AI, it's a altogether framework. That's where I see in two different fields research are expanding a lot, in terms of treating patients from a therapeutic perspective, and also for the physician to ease the operations. So there are a lot of companies like DeepScribe. What they do is it's an AI based model where a physician walks into a room with an iPhone, then just clicks on a button, it records the patient and physician conversation, and then on a backend through natural language processing, it converts into patient's notes, and it also converts into ICT codes. So a physician doesn't have to utilize time in logistics. They have to just review and then can go and see the next patient. So it also eases logistics at this standpoint. So these are my thoughts. I would also like to hear Chris's thoughts on how it can be used in clinical research.
I mean, in terms of where it's going, so I've got a couple of perspectives on this, and part of that stems from the fact that I'm also employed. I also have a corporate job in hospital administration for an extremely large healthcare provider. And interestingly, we can talk about what is AI going to do in terms of healthcare and research and the marriage between those all day, right? And I think, these use cases are amazing. I think there'll be many more amazing use cases, but I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and we're only thinking about the tip of the iceberg right now because it is so new. And the uptake is rather limited. I'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of where this goes, I think Brian alluded to it correctly earlier, in that I think this is what was necessary to really change the paradigm and change the system from a reactive system to not just a proactive, but the way I phrase it is a predictive and preventative system, which I believe should be the goal in terms of where we want to go in healthcare in the future. So, it's almost limitless in terms of how it's going to transform healthcare and healthcare related research. Right now, though, from an uptake perspective, it's very minimal, extremely minimal within at least healthcare delivery. And I think that's for two main reasons. I mean, one, it's just so new, right? And healthcare traditionally within the system, right? If you're outside, if you're in research labs, you can more or less you can do whatever you have funding for, right? I mean, there's nobody, you're not that worried about getting sued. You're not that worried about, you've got some patients, but the IRB is on top of you, and you're not gonna, make them grow a third arm out of their neck or anything. Healthcare is really concerned about lawsuits and things like that, right? And of course, patient health, obviously, but there's a lot more going on when you're in a giant corporate structure. And so it's just so new, and you're already in an environment where they're really not, let's say, the first new technology adopters. And second, we just don't know what's going to happen in terms of the regulatory and the privacy, right? When you sign up with these accounts, they say, okay, we won't use this to train the model. The information will never be fed back. That might be true, and it probably is, right? But to the healthcare industry, they're not exactly sure. And any risk, right, when you're dealing with HIPAA and high tech and all of those things, is a really big risk that they're typically not willing to take until that has been proven in the market for many, many months, if not years.
Very, very good point. And, you mentioned regulatory, and maybe we can talk about that for a moment. Artificial intelligence, we're, at a point where there's really no guide rails set up yet. And what are the moral and ethical implications of it? And one of the last peer groups that we had, somebody asked a question about, should a patient be told that artificial intelligence is being used in their diagnosis? And it gets into that whole moral aspect and the ethical component of it. And I'd be curious to hear what your take on that too is, and what you're seeing in that regard. Dr. Ochner, you want to go first?
Okay, yeah, I don't mind anything else. So, and use is very interesting from the clinician perspective, right? Because our documented use is little to none, right? But I bet you actual use, I know actually some physicians, and frankly, I don't blame them. I think they're doing the right thing, right? Are using it as a tool to augment, to enhance their clinical picture of the patient, right? And the history surrounding and the context, right? The relevant context. Whereas, as you were mentioning before, right, this could be hours, if not weeks worth of research, going through the literature and what's relevant, where have we seen this before, and is this similar to prior cases, and what are the comorbid conditions, so on and so on and so on. If you can, and there is a lot of fear surrounding this, and there's a lot of talk, oh, this is going to replace primary care physicians. And between us, it probably will, right? But I don't think that's the point. I think the point is, big picture, is this something where, maybe it will act as a primary care physician, but I think for most of healthcare, it is at least for the next, 5 years, because it's going so quickly. And that's actually a long time now in terms of technology. It will be something that I think will be appropriately used to enhance and facilitate clinical decision-making, not necessarily replace it. At some, 5 years ago, 5 years from now, when we have this conversation, it may look different. But for right now, to say, hey, ChatGPT or whoever you're using, I've got this patient X, Y, and Z, and you have to be obviously very concerned about HIPAA and that you're not including any PHI, obviously, but X, Y, and Z, history, and this is the symptomatology, this is the, chief complaint, labs, so on and so forth. What do you think? What should I be looking for? Do you have any suggestions? Give me 10 things it could be, right? And then give me all the surrounding literature around that. Personally, I want my doctor to do that, but this is a question that not everybody would answer the same.
Sure. Dr. Tan, do you have a different thought?
I will just share a little bit, because I have been teaching in the medical school for 12 years back in UC Davis. I'm actually in School of Medicine. I teach first 2 years, medical student, help them pass step 1. So actually I see like a lot of things has already been integrated to the daily diagnosis. For example, all of them use a database called UpToDate. It's kind of like a Bible in the medical field. I think if you're a doctor, you must know the database. So which is, depends on how you define the AI. I feel like anything you use a database, which is somehow related to, we call the AI, right? And the imaging analysis, diagnosis based on imaging, medical imaging, like functional MRI, CT scan, even like X-ray, all those analysis can only become more accurate, with the help of prediction. Like they will enhance the interpretation of the medical image and also can find things that we cannot see with the human eyes, right? To define the patterns that actually can lead to the early disease detection, which already happening, although we don't call that is AI, aided diagnosis. And also, for example, personalized medicine, that's only based on the like large scale analysis of genetic data. But how do you analyze this genetic information? It's all based on AI. So I feel like it's already integrated to the daily operation of the health system. Of course, ChatGPT is a different thing, but I feel like the basic diagnosis and also think about the genetic target treatment, which AI already part of the game, it's only going to make the diagnosis more accurate, and especially, will empower the early diagnosis, because I think that's the key, for the treatment.
Sure, that's a good point. And as we're talking about, obviously anything having to do with artificial intelligence and training a model is based on the data and the quality of that data. If it's not quality data, then you're not training the model correctly.
Yes.
And I'd be curious to hear, what you guys think about how AI is transforming the way we analyze and interpret large data sets in medical research, right? If it's not clean, quality data, then we're training these models to do God knows what. Dr. Thangby, would you like to jump in on that one?
Sure. So, the biggest challenge for some of the researchers, if I just speak about, is everyone is trying to, publish papers using the open source data sets they have, right? But if you, that is okay to publish papers to understand the concept. But if you try to implement the same model into an operational setting, you need the actual database. Let's say from electronic health records, you need a large language database at the end of the day. And one of the things we were discussing is how to annotate the data, right? For creating large language models. That is, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to putting data on a third-party software where you're trying to deploy it, right? Because there is a lot of HIPAA compliance, even though you get FDA approved after phase 1 to phase 3 trials, there are very few patients who will allow access to, to sign a consent form to use their data to put it into a third-party model and do diagnosis, right? At the end of the day, if you see the clinical research world perspective, not everybody, even if you convince them that their data won't be disclosed, would be comfortable for giving their electronic health records, right? So at the end of the day, if you talk about big hospitals like John Hopkins or a few others in the States, if we can find out a way how to annotate the data and how to utilize this information onto creating models for diagnosis. Let's say an easiest way from a patient perspective is showing them a way how AI could be useful to treat them. That's easy for them to understand. If you say that we are utilizing this for diagnostic purposes, the insecurity they have, what I've felt so far, is they would always be questioning why physician is not looking at our actual images. What will happen if something adverse event of happens into this treatment plan, right? So there are a lot of insecurities they come across. So how do you create a streamlined process on collecting, the data from EHR, having patients sign the consent form, putting it on a third-party software, which is an FDA approved program, and then doing actual diagnosis and creating a plan for therapeutics. So it's a whole cycle we have been observing so far. So we can talk about AI and machine learning in pieces, but at the end of the day, if we want to put it into a practical use case, if you join all the dots, we can do this in a very, very nice manner. It's just we are still doing research in this area. So we can talk about things in pieces, how it can be optimized, how it can be utilized. But at the end of the day, if you want to actually treat patient or put it into a hospital use case practice, like big hospitals like John Hopkins or a few others, right? We always have an operational challenge. So there's a whole different perspective which goes behind that. How will that be covered by the insurance? That's the biggest question, right? So, from a compliance, from a compliance perspective, from a promoting perspective, what I feel so far is how we can create a system where physicians are involved all together when it comes to having AI models being used in the hospitals. So instead of technicians using the model, how can physicians use the model and make it more optimized? That's where I see it going further. These are my general thoughts, but I'll have views of a few other people here.
Well, I saw Dr. Achner smiling as you were speaking because you hit on a few points that his business is essentially kind of wrapping
I know.
himself around and bringing all of these different points in. And you're dealing with massive amounts of data across massive different systems, some of which require the patients to opt in, some of which you don't have to go that route. So how are you seeing AI working with these large data sets and pulling this info and how that ties into personal information and privacy and all of that too?
Yeah. So you're touching on a couple of major prongs, right, that are relevant when you're trying to integrate EHR data, right? Take in people's health records from different sources. So one is, will AI help us advance or get closer to solving the issue of what they call EHR interoperability, right? And that's the fact that the way you record that health data is different from the way they do, different from the way they do, different from the way they do. And if you're going to run queries against that, if you're going to use that data, right, do predictive modeling, search for patients with particular conditions, whatever, you've got to get it uniform. Basically, I'm oversimplifying here, but this is basically the issue, right? It is a massive issue. So when you think about, it's so easy to say, oh my God, we put a man on the moon however many years ago, but when I go to this doctor, my information doesn't get back to that doctor. And so they don't know, they put me on the same drug. Now I'm taking twice, whatever, right? I mean, we've all heard this and we think it's so simple. Like, why can't just send that data over? Again, even if they can, right? And then you get into the other pillar, which is the regulatory. But even if they can, it is a massive challenge getting that data over and then made uniform, right, or transformed into a manner where you can read it, mine it, do predictive modeling, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's a massive issue. Is machine learning going to solve that? I don't know. That's a tough one. Even this AI thing is smart, and it's getting smarter every day, literally by leaps and bounds. But is that going to be solved? I don't think so, because there's too many other factors going on, and there's political factors, and there's, should we do this? Should we not do this? Or are we actually protective of our data, but we need to show something else, so on and so forth. So anyhow, there's a lot of other motivations at work to just as much not solve that issue. So anyhow, leaving that aside, regulatory. We never get it passed, so that they're moving to make electronic health records owned more, or at least co-owned by the patients themselves. Currently in 48 states, your healthcare provider owns your data, right? And we're just now getting rules saying that they even need to share it with you, right? Believe it or not, right? So they, in terms of the data, they kind of own you. That's shifting, but that's several years out. You are never, in my opinion, I don't think in my lifetime are we going to get to a place where there is just open sharing of healthcare data, nor do I really think there should be, right? I mean, it is pretty sensitive stuff for a lot of us. And so you're always going to need permission from either or both, right? The owner, that is the healthcare provider, and the patient. Right now, you only need it from a healthcare provider. Will it move to maybe we need one or the other or both? I don't know. We'll see where this is panning out. The most interesting thing to me to think about is, yeah, I mean, no question, we're going to integrate AI into looking at healthcare data and doing predictive modeling and bringing in genetic data, right? This is finally something that's going to allow us to get through that like terabytes of data and be able to actually do something with that. But the more interesting part to me, I think, is what's the regulatory going to say in terms of chat bots? So meaning we know there's tons of data saying, okay, if you follow up with a patient that has heart disease, whatever they have, right? They get discharged, they had coronary artery disease, they had an incident, they came in, they're discharged, right? And they've got to follow a whole bunch of stuff. Now, if we had time or we had the money to pay somebody to follow up with them consistently and make sure they're on the regimen, problem solve, get weekly reminders, so on and so forth, we would improve outcomes dramatically long-term, right? But we just don't have those resources, personnel or money. Chatbots may solve all that, but what is the regulatory going to do in terms of, can you have computers calling humans? I mean, probably they'll probably need to disclose. How quick is that uptake going to be? How are patients going to respond to it? I don't know, but to me, that's the most interesting thing that I'm thinking about right now in terms of where this is going.
Sure, and that being able to do the reach out, and if you have AI doing that, you're freeing up so much time for other admin duties and other research initiatives, et cetera. So definitely one of those places where AI is falling into the administrative, automative side of things as opposed to just the diagnostic side. But we have three very interesting and very different speakers here, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what impact is AI having on interdisciplinary collaboration in medical research and how it's shaping the future of biomedical innovation, right? All three of you are in different kind of areas, and how is AI how would it help all three of you to collaborate better and bring us across to where that interdisciplinary group is going to be able to further advance things in a much more rapid manner? Dr. Tian, would you like to start?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I feel like these days doing any type of the question, if we want to really ask the big question, the moon launching questions, is you need a collaboration. You can't really do things on your own by yourself. You have to really develop a collaborative network and really integrate different people from non-overlapping expertise across discipline to be able to understand this. For example, if we want to understand the brain function, design the next generation treatment, right? From my perspective, my background is about chemistry. We develop those molecular probes, but in order to be able to apply those tools to the brain, we actually often dealing with is a data analysis. Because when we start to do the recording, to look at the brain function, we're dealing with tons of the data set. Not only that, we need to use this data set to develop computational model about our theory to make those data make sense, right? Like, what's the theory? You can actually explain, observation, you experiment. We need a lot of to work with the data scientists, but also we needed to make those data to be available to others, right? And for example, these days, all the NIH funded research, they require you to submit or share, deposit all the data in the database. So the question is, how do we make those data available, annotated in the way that actually can be accessible by others? It is actually a lot of effort. We really need to bring the data scientists and also people doing computational modeling into the daily research. That's why we actually, as a Max Planck, we're actually developing a scientific computing department right now. Just we could not handle that large data set. But think about this large data set is so valuable because they're the training set to develop the models, for future AI. So that's kind of example is we really need the people coming from different biological discipline, even the engineers to work, computational scientists, biologists to be able to work to solve a big question, like to understand brain function, to be able to develop the better treatment for neurological disorders.
Sure. Thank you for that. We only have 10 minutes left, and we do have a few questions from some of the participants. So, Nikki, if you'd like to read them off, and maybe we could have just one person answer per question. A little speed dating here.
Sure. So I took note here. So the first one, and I'll drop this in chat too, just in case. So it says, it's understood that there is a physician shortage in the US and that AI could really assist with decision making, but are you worried about at all the over reliance on AI that may lead to neglecting clinical judgment or patient context? And that was a long question. I'll drop it in chat.
Okay.
Dr.
So,
Sangvi, would you like to take? Yeah.
sure. Chris, if you want, you
Yeah,
can-
by all means.
Okay. So, that's why, I was emphasizing on a point on physician using the software, not the technician. So what happens is at the end of the day, even though you have a diagnostic, approach using AI, if you are using it for that, the physicians, it's just a decision support system at the end of the day. It's not decision-making system. So at the end of the day, you can also recognize that your optic nerves are going right, or it's just diabetes, right? So, we are using technology to just get insights and to just understand much closer if you talk about image processing, if you talk about video processing. So at the end of the day, we can recognize that are there any other disease progressing, right? Along with the interventions the patient has. So this needs to be physician driven instead of the investor driven solutions, right? So that's where it becomes very much important, as Chris was emphasizing, that there are a lot of things which comes as a part of operational issues when you actually want to put it into implementation. At the end of the day, if physicians are concerned about patients, they, with technology, without technology, will treat them. They have been treating so far without AI, right? So at the end of the day, how much physicians are getting involved, and how much patients are interacting with this kind of new behavioral changes in medicine. That's the way how we can take this further. We need both. Otherwise, we are lacking on something. So that's where I see this going. Patient needs to be equally, equally involved in helping doctors take this thing further, take technologies further, and doctor needs to be equally involved, and not their physician. I'm not the technicians or not their staff to be involved directly. So that's where I see collaboration going much stronger at the end of the day.
Do you think that those who are using AI with their decision making are understanding the limits of that technology at this point, going, I can use it up to this point, but at this point I need to put my own eyes on it, or something to that effect?
So Chris, sorry, Brian, it's a joke that engineers are annoying, because I'm an engineer myself. So they know softwares are annoying at some point. So they'll put their eyes on for sure. So
So
they'll
That's
always
great.
be like, softwares can just guide us. So it's always, whenever I say it's a guiding tool, it's not a decision-making tool. It's a decision support system. So physician would be involved for sure.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and if you've got doctors going, I'll let ChatGPT handle it.
Yeah.
I don't trust their clinical judgment anyway.
Right.
True.
I've not seen that, let's say, yet.
Yeah, well, it's a mood behavior that whether I like bagels or I like donuts, then it's a different story. But I cannot worry about using AI for my eyeballs. I need a doctor to see it for sure.
Sure. I kind of liken it to our side view mirrors on our cars. Most cars now have a little light if there's a car next to you as you're about to change lanes. But how many of us only utilize that light don't most people still kind of take a look and just double check that the car isn't next to you before you switch the lane. And so that kind of does draw parallels into artificial intelligence and whether we strictly lean on it entirely or we still put that human eyes on it to make sure that it's not making a mistake, because it's certainly not perfect, right? And even if it improves a diagnosis from 7 out of 10 to 9 out of 10, there's still that 1 out of 10 people that it's misdiagnosing. And so we still need to have people looking at it and making sure that everything, those guide rails are still there. Nikki, we had another question, right?
Yes. So I guess I'll ask one of the two. I'll put both of them in chat if anybody wants to answer in chat, because they're both, I think, questions that may take longer answers. But the next one was, do you foresee issues with AI-powered healthcare not being equitably accessible and potentially exacerbating issues and disparities in healthcare access?
It's an interesting question. I think it's the opposite personally, right? I mean, this is going to dramatically increase accessibility, right? It's decentralizing healthcare, which is where we've been heading anyway. You've got people that are going to have access to at least, something that can diagnose and write a script and send it to CVS or whatever down the street from them. So primary care, yeah, I think this is coming and going to be a tremendous tool. Now, there's a lot of fear surrounding it and saying, oh, AI is racist. And AI is not racist, but yes, does it illustrate the importance of what we already know, which is basically representative sampling, right? Same thing in clinical trials. And so, yes, is it very important that we make sure the data on which it's trained is representative? Absolutely, of course, but that's a known issue now. We can solve for it moving forward and integrate